reincarnated as a loner in another world, and every girl wants to be with him. A man named Haruka, who has no friends and a mission to survive. He against goblin battles to magic mishaps, he's about to turn worthless into unstoppable. The story begins with Haruka, a boy hiding from a group of goblins who are busy preparing their meal. Trying to slip away unnoticed, Haruka accidentally snaps a tree branch, instantly drawing all the goblins' attention. He bolts running as fast as he can, but as the goblins close and Haruka smirks, he suddenly leaps into the air, revealing his trap a hidden pitfall. The goblins tumble straight into it, just as Haruka planned. He tosses off his hoodie, proudly admiring the trap he dug earlier. The scene shifts, showing he's been living alone in this strange world for a while. On an average school day, Haruka is sitting alone at his desk because he is a total loner. He is well aware that he is a loner. As a matter of fact, he enjoys being alone since his only other option would be to hang out with his classmates, and he freaking hates them. There are a bunch of groups in the class, including the delinquents, the popular girls, the gym bros, and then there's the other people no one cares about. Haruka doesn't belong to any of these groups, and he is fine with that since he has a lot more time to read his books with no friends. However, his reading session is interrupted when a bright light appears beneath him. It looks like a summoning circle is spawning beneath the students, and for a moment, Haruka gets excited because he knows this means he gets to go on an Isekai adventure. But then he realizes that he's been getting too much screen time for a loner, and if he knows anything about Isekai, it means he's going to get screwed over somehow. He's not about to let himself become a victim before Black Clover Season 5 drops. So while the portal is still loading, he walks up to the door and tries to leave. Unfortunately, the door seems to be bolted shut with magic. No matter how much force he uses, he isn't able to get out of the room. The portal is almost done loading, and his classmates begin disappearing, fading away. As a last-ditch effort to avoid his otherworldly fate, Haruka decides to crawl into the ceiling vents to wait out the summoning circle. He jumps up and manages to crawl his way into the roof of the class. But just when he thought he was safe, the summoning circle followed him through the roof, and he ended up getting summoned anyway. It sucks that he couldn't stay on Earth, but since he already knows how this kind of thing goes, he expects some kind of fat king or pretty princess to show up soon and ask for his help or something. However, that's not what happens. Haruka sees a bald old man frantically waving his arms around and panicking at the sight of him. Apparently, the old man is God, and he was the one in charge of the summoning. He has already sent all of Haruka's classmates off to the other world, but because Haruka came up with the idea to hide in the ceiling while still getting summoned, his summoning was a mess. So, God needs to send him to the other world quickly before he gets in trouble for this mess. He tells Haruka that he will get abilities to help him in the other world, but since he's late, all the good abilities have already been chosen. The only things remaining are all the leftover ones that no one wanted. To list a few, he has the option of picking skills that equate to professional Roblox, gambling dice, contact lenses, and a stick. To make it worse, he only has a limited number of skills he can choose. Haruka begins taking out his anger on God for summoning him here and only having trash skills left. God knows he messed up, but he didn't graduate from God University just to get yelled at by a high schooler. So, he tells Haruka that he will give him all the remaining trash skills as an apology, but he doesn't want to see his ugly face around here anymore. God then teleports Haruka to the other world immediately.
チートスキルは早い者勝ちで、いや魔法をゲットするようだが、43人も召喚するのはダイスはないな。村人 A セットとコンツ A ってほぼ棒だよね。終わってんだろ。よくわからないのしか残ってない。ほうれん草って何？引きこもりでニートってなんだよ。これで終わり？
It's cool that he gets to have more skills than normal, but that doesn't do him much good if he gets tossed out into the woods as soon as he arrives. He's never lived in the woods before, and he has no supplies. But then he notices a pouch on the floor, and it turns out that it's part of the adventure skill. The pouch allows him to store an unlimited number of items in his inventory. There's also a bunch of starter gear in there, so at least Haruka isn't going to be doing this without equipment. After he's got his stuff on, he decides to check his stats. Thanks to the gambling dice, he needs to roll a number to get stat points. He just goes with it and throws the dice on the ground. As a result, he ends up with a score of M, and he has no idea what M means, so he just decides to put the M points all into his luck stat. To his surprise, when he opens his stat window, his luck stat is completely maxed out, making him wish he had used it on something better. He continues looking through his stats, and to his surprise, aside from all the trash skills, he actually gained 2 unique skills as well. Because he was such a loner on Earth, he will be unable to form a party in this world even if he wants to. But in exchange, his second skill allows him to force monsters to serve him because he wouldn't be able to make any friends otherwise. Haruka is a bit disappointed that he won't get a chance to make a harem for himself, but it is what it is. Right now, he's more concerned with the fact that he doesn't see any of his classmates nearby, and he finds that strange since this is supposedly the starting location. Right now, he needs to focus on getting supplies so he can live a good life out here in the woods, but that's a lot easier said than done when he can barely see anything with all the trees in the way. At this rate, it won't be long before he runs into a monster accidentally, and if that were to happen, he would be a dead man for sure. Just then, Haruka remembers that he has a contact lens skill, so he puts on the contact lenses and suddenly he can see all kinds of information about his surroundings. It turns out that the contact lenses come with an inbuilt appraisal skill, and with it, he is able to easily traverse the forest and find some mushrooms that he can eat without dying. He decides to pick some, and thanks to his villager bag, he can take as many as he wants. He then goes over to the river nearby and uses his bag to fetch a little water to drink. Once he's done with that, something else catches his eye. He wanders back into the forest where he finds a little cave. It looks too interesting for him to ignore, so Haruka says a little prayer in case there's a monster here that will attack him. After that, he begins exploring the cave. Luckily, it looks like there aren't any monsters here and this place is quite spacious. So he decides to make this his base of operations. He pulls out a tent and a magic lantern from his bag to set up camp. After which, he then proceeds to light a small fire with his temperature control magic so he can stay warm for the night. Coincidentally, using his temperature magic once allowed him to unlock a new fire skill, and being wary of monsters made him acquire several detection skills as well. But Haruka's only attack skill is a stick, so he still needs to figure out a way to defend himself. The next morning, Haruka wakes up with a jolt, nervously leaves his tent, and to his relief, it looks like there weren't any monster attacks overnight. He is safe, all thanks to the anti-monster properties of his useless skill items. But even if he is safe from harm, it doesn't mean he's safe from hunger. So he busts out a frying pan and cooks up some of the mushrooms he gathered yesterday. And if you're wondering where he got the frying pan, it was just sitting there in his villager bag along with a full set of kitchen knives and some beef jerky. So far, that bag has been the most useful thing in Haruka's arsenal. He wonders what kind of villager stocked it up before he got it. In any case, now that he has eaten, he needs to figure out what he's going to do from now on. He heads outside and takes a little walk to think. For now, that cave will work well as a base of operations, but Haruka still needs to worry about finding a reliable source of food and creating safety measures against any monsters that may try to attack him in this world. Fortunately, with his contact lenses, it shouldn't be too hard for him to gather enough food to last for a while, as he finds some more mushrooms and some herbs almost immediately. But he still has to figure out a solution to his monster problem. Just then, Haruka's detection skill kicks in, and he notices something going on nearby. He decides to go check it out and is horrified once he realizes that the noise was caused by goblins. It would be bad enough it was one, but there are two of them, and they both have strength stats that are higher than his own. He wonders if he will be able to take them down with his current strength and contemplates running away. But the fact that he is living in this forest means he will eventually have to fight the goblins if he wants to survive, so he chooses to get it over with while he still has the element of surprise. With that said, he isn't sure his stick will be good enough for the job on its own, so he tries using one of his trash skills to wrap the stick in magic to see if that does anything. It works out better than he thought, so he lunges out of the bushes and strikes at one of the goblins. After smacking it on the head, the goblin is dazed and confused, but Haruka doesn't stop there and proceeds to beat the daylights out of it until it finally dies. That's one down, but Haruka still has to deal with the other one. As it charges at him, he dodges out of the way of its attack. Now that he has gotten a feel for it, Haruka realizes that the goblin's attacks are actually really easy to predict, so he effortlessly evades it and then proceeds to smack it around before hitting it with a wave of magic.
思った以上にいい感じ。チートを超えてやる。攻撃は単調。
Having just won his first fight against goblins, Haruka thinks that's enough work for the day and decides to head back to the cave so he can rest a little. Once he's back, he roasts some mushrooms for dinner and takes a look at the club he looted off the goblin corpse. It may have high damage, but it's heavy and has a short range. Haruka decides to continue using his stick for now. He then checks the rest of his stats, and to his surprise, he managed to level up from the fight he had today. Not only that, all his existing stats were doubled as a result. By the next morning, Haruka wakes up and has breakfast as usual, but he is starting to get sick of eating nothing but mushrooms all the time. He really wishes he could eat some meat out here, but he's going to have to learn how to hunt to do that. Before that, he needs to learn how to enhance himself first. The first thing he wants to try is the magic fusion skill he acquired. For a quick explanation, it basically covers his entire body with magic in order to boost his physical and magical defenses. It also greatly increases his strength, so he should be able to fight with much more efficiency. Additionally, his appraisal skill was upgraded to level 2, so he uses it to see if anything has changed. But the only difference is that there's a question mark next to all the descriptions. Haruka has clearly never played video games before, because he spends a whole minute trying to figure out what a question mark icon could mean, and eventually he just gives up on it altogether. Instead, he heads outside to do some magic training, and as he is leaving, he notices something on the floor. He picks it up, thinking it might be some meat, but it turns out to be another mushroom. It may be delusional, but Haruka was really hoping meat would just grow on trees in this world, and he soon realizes that he's not going to be finding any meat on the forest floor. So he decides to just go ahead with his magic training. He activates his mana infusion and takes a step forward, but with the physical boost he gets, he ends up flying forward by several meters. His body feels much lighter than before, and with very little effort, he can easily dart around the forest almost like he's teleporting. On top of that, his dexterity is greatly enhanced as well, so he can move and strike at things with precision. The first thing he does with his enhanced strength is challenge 2 random goblins, and unlike yesterday, he is able to knock the goblin out in one hit. He's feeling really confident about his new strength, so he thinks he can handle even more goblins. But when he actually sees a group of 3 goblins, he starts having second thoughts and slowly backs away before he gets jumped. He decides that he has worked hard enough for today and heads back to his cave so he can practice his magic. He continues this routine, practicing fighting during the day and tinkering with his magic at night to see what he can do with it. Apparently, he can make coffee tables by following this routine. Haruka is eventually able to one-shot a goblin and create a proper table with his magic crafting. He then uses it to create a gate for his cave so he can go out at night, and that means he can finally go hunting. He goes after a rabbit because he hasn't tasted meat in so long, but when he finally catches up to it and is about to start cooking, he notices something else nearby. At first, he thinks it's a goblin, but upon further inspection, he finds out that it's something even worse. Those are the delinquents from his class. He really doesn't want to have to deal with them, so he intends to sneak away in the other direction. But as he starts heading that way, he realizes the popular girls are here as well, along with the gym bros and the nerds. He doesn't think the nerds are that bad since he regularly hung out with them back in school, but he still doesn't want to have to talk to them. Finally, he notices the student council group, which has the class rep in it. While he may hate socializing with the people in his class, he has to admit that the class rep has always been really nice to him. So it would be the least he could do to return that kindness, even if it's just to say hello. He briefly considers revealing himself and talking to her, but then again, he doesn't want to ruin the solitary life he already has. Since no one knows that he is here, he has the chance to be truly alone, like he has always wanted. There's no idle chatter, no taxes, and no one to annoy him. So he really doesn't want to mess that up by having contact with his classmates because they are already pretty annoying. That's why he officially decides that he will ignore his classmates and live by himself so he can conquer this world alone. Then Haruka hides from the other students, however. One of the delinquents hears something from his direction. He is about to be discovered, but the guys end up assuming that the noise came from the bunny that was supposed to be Haruka's dinner. Haruka spies on the delinquents to hear what they are discussing, but the perverts are just talking about girls. They are some real degenerates, but Haruka knows that the class rep will stop them from doing anything to the girls. However, the delinquents have a guy named Tanaka on their side, whose skills will allow them to do whatever they want. The delinquents go back to the other students, but Haruka is a serious loner, and he doesn't want anything to do with them. Haruka heads home to enjoy more of his delicious mushrooms, and he finds that his loner level has gone up. It's kind of a depressing title, because it's starting to wreck Haruka's self-confidence. Haruka is still only level 3, and he blames his Master of None and Dummy skills. He isn't sure what they do, but he assumes that Master of None means that he can't stay focused on any one thing long enough to make it really strong. However, it does allow him to accomplish a lot of different things. As for the dummy skill, Haruka assumes that it just makes him a puppet, which would make it the worst skill to ever exist. Haruka decides to eat his troubles away, but this just reminds him that he doesn't have any meat to eat. On day 7, Haruka wakes up to the sounds of fighting. He finds the nerds in battle and wonders if he should help them. He uses his appraisal skill on them and is shocked to find that they won't need his help at all. They have way better classes than him, and Haruka is the only one in need even among the nerds. This reminds him that, unlike him, they actually have overpowered skills. Unfortunately, this is a lot like how things were in his old world. His class was full of top athletes, and as students they even had kids of celebrities. Haruka often wondered how he ended up there. Haruka determines that the dweebs can handle themselves, but he notices that some sneaky little monsters are sneaking up from behind them. Haruka remembers being friendly with the nerds in class, so he decides to help them out. The nerds thank him, and Haruka shows them his sweet-looking cave. They marvel at how fancy it is.
良い子は寝てる時間だよ。MP、まだ無理。ダメだ。オタクたちか。ちょっと苦戦してる。なんで俺だけ無職なんだよ。チートスキル持ちじゃん。全国トップレベルのアスリートや子供とかばっか。成績優秀な男女みたいな普通の生徒がいるのか。ゴブめしょうがねえ。Haruka explains that he just learned how to use earth magic, and he used it to make his cave really secure.
They wonder if Haruka did all this alone, so he points out that he's always alone. Haruka wonders why the nerds are with the other students, and he is shocked when they reveal that they're on the run. It all started when everyone was transported before Haruka. Everyone was in shambles because they didn't know anything about being Isekai, but the nerds were well versed on this subject. They were already assigning points into their skills, so the jocks demanded information from them. Everyone else was falling apart, but the class rep knew that they needed to keep quiet in the woods. It was too late, however, as they were already found by a group of goblins. Haruka is shocked to hear that even the delinquents were trembling in fear. But this was the perfect time for the nerds to shine. They acted like they were the protagonists of their own anime and began taking out the goblins. The jocks were inspired by all the nerdy bravery going on, so they helped out and the monsters were defeated. The class rep quickly gathered herself and led everyone to a safe riverside clearing. The nerds took the opportunity to shine even more as they helped everyone set up camp. Thanks to their lifelong dedication to avoiding touching grass, they became experts in all things Isekai, including survival. The class rep organized everyone and put them to work. Soon enough, everyone came together and began working as one. This didn't last long, however, as the popular girls decided that they didn't want to work anymore. The class rep tried to explain that their best chance of surviving was by sticking together, but the group started to fall apart. They were all tired of working so hard, so they just left all the responsibilities to the nerds. The class eventually fell apart completely, and there was nothing the class rep could do. From then on, only the class rep, the nerds, and a couple of other students did any work. The other students were just so lazy, so the nerds began to resent them. They were even in charge of doing all the fighting. The nerds were super dependable though, as they just wanted to get stronger and level up. This was because they saw what skills the delinquents picked. Some of the skills they chose were Charm and Puppeteer, 2 abilities that grant control over other people. The nerds knew that the delinquents had bad intentions, so they were leveling up to stand against them. The delinquents were working hard to level up as well because they needed to in order to use the skills. The nerds kept a very close eye on the delinquents, and they eventually heard what they planned to make some of the girls do. The nerds told the class rep, so she decided that she would have to level up as well. Unfortunately, the delinquents reached the level requirements for their skills soon after. The class rep just so happened to run into them at the worst moment, but seconds later, the delinquents were on the ground. The nerds were prepared for this very moment, and they used their seal abilities to seal the Charm and Puppeteer skills of the delinquents. They exposed the forced plans of the delinquents, so the delinquents ran out of the camp. However, one night, the delinquents made their return, and they got their revenge by using weapons. They destroyed the camp and declared that they would be back later to cause more chaos. For some odd reason, the nerds ended up receiving all the blame for what happened. The popular girls, whom they kept from becoming puppets, were the ones to turn on them first, and the other students followed. The class rep and a few other students took the nerds' side, but it was too much to deal with, and the nerds decided to just leave. Haruka feels really bad for them, so he throws a mushroom party for them. Haruka ends up spending the next day with the nerds as well, and he determines that not being a loner is okay sometimes. Eventually, Haruka says goodbye to his new buddies, and they offer to let Haruka join them. They're going to look for a town so they can get started as adventurers. Haruka agrees that he's closer to the nerds compared to the other groups, but he shocks everyone when he still declines. Haruka simply shoos them away, so the nerds leave.
委員長と一部の生徒は用語たちは気まずさのあまりお前ら今日のご飯は豪勢に行こう食え食えキノコクラスのやつらに駆られんなよはるかくんはどちらかといえば駆られませんってば本当に来ないんですかクラスでも僕たち側じゃああ確かにそうだなだが断る
Haruka admits to himself that he would like to head into town, but he knows that with his terrible stats, he would only hold the dweebs back. The nerds seem pretty worried about the class rep, so Haruka decides to go check on the other students. On his way there, Haruka is confronted by a kobold, but he manages to punch it into unconsciousness. Haruka is surprised to see that no students are left at the campsite, and his enemy detection skill reveals some footprints. Following the trail leads him to find the popular girls. Haruka panics and decides to get started on cooking dinner back home, but the girls try to stop him. They say that they just want to talk, but Haruka knows that being around them is the exact opposite of quiet solitude. Haruka runs for his life, but he is shocked when the girls politely ask him to stop by saying please. The girls explain that they're looking for the nerds, but Haruka assumes that they just want to put them to work again. The girls shock him, however, as they want to apologize to the nerds because they just now realize that they owe their lives to them. Haruka knows that these girls have never apologized in their entire lives, but they are very serious. Haruka breaks the bad news by explaining that they have no chance of catching up to the nerds, but they still want to know where they went. Haruka points out that they wouldn't make it out of the woods the way they are now because they don't even know how to fight. The girls are discouraged, but Haruka demands to know if this means that they're just going to give up. He demands to know if they're serious about apologizing to the nerds, and Haruka thinks about how he needs to test the girls for the sake of the nerds. Haruka's tough motivation tactic backfires, however, as the girls begin to cry. They just wanted to apologize to the nerds, but now they fear that they will be eaten. Haruka has no clue what's going on, so the girls beg for him to teach them how to survive until they find the nerds. Haruka accidentally says yes, and this activates his domination skill. This makes him rule over the girls, and Haruka wonders how this could have happened. The girls end up following him around like lost puppies with soulless eyes. It's also terrifying because the girls now finish off bad guys without a single word. They even bring crystals dropped by the monsters like they are dogs returning a frisbee. Haruka tries to heal the girls, but they just heal him even though he doesn't need it. Haruka fears what the class rep would say if she saw this, and he wonders how he can cancel his domination skill. Just then, the class rep finds him, but Haruka is thinking too hard about a solution to even notice. He doesn't realize that she's there at all, so she forces him to acknowledge her. Elsewhere, the delinquents make a plan of their own, and they determine that they must start by getting rid of their biggest problem. The class rep, however, doesn't seem to like the way he has been walking around with girls. When the class rep gets Haruka's attention, he panics because he doesn't know what to say to her. Come to think of it, he doesn't actually know what her name is. They've been in the same class since elementary school, and the class rep has always been nice to him. He can't believe he never bothered to learn her name. A few moments later, the rest of the girls from the class show up, since everyone aside from the popular girls was following the class rep's orders. Speaking of the popular girls, the class rep notices them standing behind Haruka, but they look like they're currently sharing a single brain cell. The class rep thinks Haruka must have done something to them. He would like to say he's innocent, but the fact of the matter is that even if he didn't mean to do it, his skill turned the girls into his servants, and he doesn't know what to do about it. He tries his best to explain the situation without making himself seem like the bad guy, but none of the girls actually believe him. So Haruka gives up on trying to prove his innocence and turns to walk away. Unfortunately, the class rep forces him to stay while she checks on Shimazaki to make sure she's alright. Luckily, a little shaking was all it took for the subjugation to be undone, so Shimazaki tells the class rep that she's alright. The class rep is relieved to hear that Haruka thinks that means he can leave now, but the class rep still wants to find out how the whole subjugation thing happened in the first place, so she refuses to let Haruka go yet. While the girls are talking, Haruka is left alone by a tree. And since he's got nothing to do, he decides to try practicing his magic so he can expand his house once he gets home. He begins trying to figure out how to make a basement, but he messes it up and accidentally buries himself in the ground from the neck down. He's stuck like that until the class rep finds him, and she is shocked to see him buried in the dirt when she just asked him to wait a few minutes. Boredom can drive a guy crazy. She walks over to Haruka's head to grab him so he can get out of the dirt, and once he is free, she apologizes for not trusting him, since Shimazaki told her that he was just trying to help everyone. Haruka doesn't recall ever saying he would help everyone, but the class rep and the other girls are already thanking him, so he decides to just go with it. Since everything has been settled, he wants to head back home, but the girls start getting mad because he wants to leave them out in the wilderness without helping at all. The class rep realizes Haruka just mentioned having a home, so she asks him about it. Haruka explains that he had some spare time on his hands, so he just kind of built a house. The class rep can't believe he managed to build an entire house by himself while they've been struggling to manage a camp. The other girls are extremely impressed as well, so they call a meeting and begin talking amongst themselves. The class rep asks how many people Haruka's house can accommodate, and from the way he designed it, it would fit about 240 people, but he would have to move some furniture around and empty the indoor pool. The class rep is really jealous of how well Haruka is doing for himself, and as much as she hates to bother him, she asks if she and the other girls can stay with him for the night since they're all currently homeless. Haruka freaks out because it's one thing to invite guys to stay over for the night, but this is an entire class worth of girls, and he's having a hard time controlling himself. Once he calms down, Haruka begins leading them all to his house, but because of all the time he has spent roaming these woods, he is far better at getting around. One of his skills even gives him some helpful pointers to keep him going in the right direction. Eventually, Haruka makes it back to his house with the girls, and after catching their breath, they are stunned by the magnificence of Haruka's house. It's been so long since they've had a roof over their heads or experienced the wonders of indoor plumbing, so as soon as Haruka mentions that there's a bath over in that direction, the girls start frantically running towards it and strip down right there in front of Haruka. There's no way he can handle spending an entire night in the same room with all of them, so he sets up a tent to be alone and prepares to go to sleep.
おいでませー。と、そっちがキッチンで。きっと夢だよこれ。向こうが。
Just then, the class rep walks into his tent because there's something she wanted to talk to him about. First of all, she thanks him for all his help because she wouldn't have known what to do without him. After the nerds left, the gym bros decided to leave as well, so the girls were all left on their own. It's been tough, but now that they've had a bath and a good meal, the girls are all in high spirits once more. Still, even though things worked out eventually, the class rep feels that she has failed as a representative because she couldn't do anything to help the class's situation by herself. Haruka thinks she's being a little too hard on herself because up till now, she's been the one protecting the girls and keeping them together. That may be true, but the class rep says it just got lucky because they didn't run into any monsters out there. If they had, she would have been powerless to protect the class, unlike the nerds. Again, Haruka doesn't think she's being fair to herself because the nerds have practically spent their whole lives preparing for this situation, so it's natural that they would be able to handle themselves well. However, on her end, this was the first time she had ever even heard about an Isekai, so all things considered, she's been doing pretty well. The class rep feels a lot better after hearing him say she did a good job, although her accomplishments still seem insignificant compared to Haruka, who created a functioning household in just a week. She wishes him a good night and heads back inside, but with everything that happened today, there's no way Haruka is getting any sleep tonight. Early the next morning, Haruka wakes up and finds one of the girls sitting outside his tent, asking him to get up because breakfast is ready. It takes him a minute to realize what's going on, but when he finally does, he freaks out a little and says he actually wants to sleep in a little longer. The girl doesn't accept his answer and crawls on top of him to convince him to get out of bed, so Haruka gives up and asks what's for breakfast. He was expecting the usual mushroom soup with a side of extra mushrooms, but to his surprise, breakfast is actually fish today, and he is so excited that he accidentally headbutts the girl. The girl is slightly hurt, but Haruka couldn't care less because he finally gets to eat something other than mushrooms, and he absolutely loves it. Class Rap doesn't understand why he is so excited to be eating fish when he has been living next to the river this entire time. While that may be true, Haruka simply sucks at fishing, so he has never been able to catch any for the girls. They must have a reliable method of catching fish, so Haruka asks to see how they do it. The class rep agrees and takes Haruka to the river along with one of the girls who has a lightning magic skill. He asks her how she catches fish, and she explains that she kind of just electrocutes the water until the fish stop being alive. Haruka is really impressed, so he pleads with her to do it one more time. While the girl doesn't really want to, she agrees anyway since Haruka is helping her out. She spawns another lightning ball, but before she can throw it in the river, Haruka takes the lightning ball and seals it with his packing skill. He then tosses it in the river and is able to catch some fish as well. On top of that, he also acquires lightning magic, so he won't be needing the lightning girl's help anymore. The class rep asks what he just did, so Haruka explains that by using his packing skill on a particular element, he can gain that kind of magic. It's probably an effect caused by a combination of his many skills, which is definitely useful, but he still doesn't think it's impressive since he only has a bunch of useless skills. While the other girls are playing by the river, Haruka sits with the class rep and asks what she and the other girls plan to do after this. The class rep says the details still aren't certain yet, but they plan to head for the nearest village to try and catch up with the nerds. However, they're going to need to level up if they plan to make it out of this forest on their own, so Haruka offers to help them train before they leave. A short while later, all the girls are gathered out in the forest, and before Haruka begins his training camp, he says he would like to know what their current levels are. The girls tell him that their levels are all above 16, and Haruka begins feeling depressed because he's still only level 7 after all this time in the forest. He's honestly starting to doubt that the girls even need his help to begin with, so he decides to give them a small test and sets them up to fight a bunch of kobold to see how well they do. The girls think this will be a piece of cake since the kobold are only level 6, but a few moments later, they've all had their asses handed to them and are down for the count.
みんなのレベルを確認しておきたいんだけど
17です。20だけど。
16! レベル高え
21。16かな。
ちなみに俺はまだ。お、いいところに。これから皆さんには
暇
をしてもらいます。手頃な低レベル3匹。レッツコボー。
やれやれだね。
The girls had no idea that the kobold would actually fight back, so they all head back to regroup and think of a new strategy. For some reason, the strategy meeting is taking place in Haruka's magic tent. They can all fit since Haruka's tent is able to expand, but he still has no idea why they chose to come here. After a little deliberation, the girls head back out and they are sure they won't lose this time. Haruka is glad that they seem motivated, but he honestly doesn't think they'll be able to win this time either. Once they've left, the girl from this morning approaches Haruka and says she wants to apologize for her behavior this morning. She was intentionally getting close to him just to see if he would try to take advantage of the situation if given the chance. She admits that she didn't trust him at first, but he gave them a place to stay, food to eat, and is even helping them learn how to fight, so she feels like she can trust him. She'll be back to wake him up tomorrow with his breakfast. Haruka is glad she trusts him and says he's looking forward to seeing her tomorrow, although he doesn't know her name, so he's just going to call her Fish Girl. The next morning, Haruka is happy to receive the fish from Fish Girl, but then he hears the other girls talking about going out to fight Kobold again for revenge. Before they can leave, the class rep calls them back and says they need to train first because they are definitely going to lose again if they go back to fight now. She suggests they practice by fighting goblins, but when they actually start a fight against the goblins, it doesn't go well for the girls. Despite this loss, some of the girls still think they're ready to fight the kobold, although a bunch of them pretend to be sick to avoid having to fight anymore. Haruka doesn't think this is going to end well, so he's prepared to intervene if necessary. However, to his surprise, the girls actually learn from their mistakes against the goblins and work together to take down the kobold. The class rep congratulates them all on their victory, and Haruka is relieved because this means the girls can handle themselves and won't need to stay with him anymore. He believes he can finally get back to his life as a loner, but the class rep comes over and thanks him for agreeing to come with them to the nearest village. He knows for a fact he never said he would join them, but the class rep is really insistent, so he caves in and agrees to go with her. A little while later, everyone has packed their stuff and is ready to leave the forest, but Haruka reminds them that they don't know what they might run into out there, so they should all keep their guard up. At the same time, in a different part of the forest, one of the boys from the class is seen running for his life. When he makes the mistake of turning around, he trips over a rock and is now cornered by his attacker, and having nowhere to run, he ends up getting strangled to death. This is the end of Loner Life in Another World Episode 3. Thank you so much for staying on this channel and watching our videos. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can keep you updated with our latest content. See you in the next video!